My name is Fidel Maltez, and I am the town manager here in Reading. It is my pleasure to introduce you to this event tonight. We've got a lot of speakers that are going to say wonderful things, so I won't take up a lot of time today. What I did want to share is that I've got a long connection with the Marquis de Lafayette. I actually had the pleasure of attending college in Lafayette College in Eastern Pennsylvania, and we learned a lot about the values of Lafayette, of the Marquis, and actually in my prior role in Chelsea, I was the Commissioner of Public Works, and I got the call to install a similar marker like this in Chelsea, and it was installed and unveiled, and it is wonderful to celebrate the long history that we have in our region, in our state, and in our towns and cities. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sophia Latham.
Yeah, Sophia!
Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue. Je m'appelle Sophia Latham et je me sens honorée d'être présente parmi vous aujourd'hui. Hello everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Sophia Latham and I'm honored to be here today. Les membres de ma famille sont les propriétaires de cet endroit depuis les 50 dernières années. De plus, nous sommes tous et toutes passionnés par l'histoire. Alors, nous avons véritablement de la chance que cette propriété ait fait partie du voyage du Marquis de Lafayette. Personnellement, j'étais inspirée par ses aventures et son point de vue extrêmement à la vie. My family's been stewards of this property over the last 50 years. And in addition to that, we are all very passionate about history, so we feel very lucky that this property was part of Marquis de Lafayette's journey in the United States. I myself have been personally inspired by Lafayette's adventures, and he always had such an exhilarating outlook on life. Mais la vie et le service de Lafayette sont plus que simplement des aventures. Ils symbolisent des liens de la liberté et de l'amitié entre les États-Unis et la France. Des liens que nous continuons à tisser et à célébrer à nous réunissant aujourd'hui. But Lafayette's life and service was more than just adventures. They are a symbol of the bonds of liberty and friendship between the United States and France, a symbol that we gather here to celebrate today. Ceci dit, cette dédication n'aurait pas été possible sans le travail, le dévouement, la perspicacité d'un homme, Peter McGuire, qui tient la torche de ce projet au Reading. With that said, today's dedication would not be possible, but for the insight, hard work, and dedication of one man, Peter McGuire, who has been the torchbearer of this project in Reading. I'm thus honored to introduce Peter McGuire.
Wow, this is it's amazing. It looks like my after-school detention class at the Marshall Middle School where I was principal. Okay, people all behave. Thank you. Welcome to our celebration. I'm Peter McGuire. I'm a newbie in town. I've only been here since 1978. In 2024-25, America will be celebrating the 200th anniversary of the visit of General Lafayette. Lafayette, a wealthy nobleman, joined the Continental Army at the age of 19. He was a close friend of Washington and helped persuade the French king and the government to support the Americans. He was a hero at Yorktown. Without French support, one can only guess what would have been the result of our revolution. In 1824, Lafayette, being the oldest living general of the Revolutionary War, how can he be the oldest? He was only 19 when he came over here. Everybody else was much older. He was invited by President Monroe and the Congress to come over and be celebrated as America's guest. He came and was celebrated by thousands across America. He indeed came to Reading. We also wish to celebrate him today. But this is a double celebration. Our own Governor John Brooks, his portrait over here, was also a Revolutionary War hero. He was a personal friend of General Lafayette for over 50 years. John Brooks was Reading's first doctor. He came here from Medford in 1773 and, as they used to say back then, took a room in the John Damon house. It's right behind us, over here in John Street, about 4 houses up. You'll see the plaque on the wall, John Damon House. He was captain of the Reading Minutemen, the Navy SEALs of that time. He was an alarm rider. On April 1775, when word of the British reached Reading, he rode up Haverhill Street to present North Reading, wanting to stand by your arms. He led our militia in Concord on that day when Reading was the first unit to engage the British after they left Concord. He was the hero of the Battle of Saratoga. His unit routed the Hessian mercenaries. This proved to Europe, and especially the French, that Americans could now stand up to any European power and were in it for the long run. George Washington got word of Brooks' experience and expertise, and he asked him, would you be willing to go to a small town in Pennsylvania and help train the Continental Army? That small town was Valley Forge. One of the officers with him, General Lafayette. They were both there for that terrible winter. They remained friends for life. When Lafayette came to Boston in 1824, he and Brooks embraced as old friends at the State House. The two, along with a couple of thousand or so, then walked over to the Bunker Hill to dedicate the site of the Bunker Hill Monument. John Brooks went on to serve America in Massachusetts, culminating in governor of the Bay State. Let us commemorate both men in celebration. One small country doctor, one of European royalty, who together fought for our liberty. Now, why we're here? The Lafayette Trail Incorporated contacted me about a year ago about raising a marker celebrating Lafayette's visit. That organization requires primary source materials to actually prove that he did come here. You probably know that thousands of towns in eastern United States all swear, they have residents swear, Washington slept here. Well, can they prove it? Mostly not. Well, a year ago, a small group of Reading citizens formed with the mission of proving that General Lafayette did visit Reading, and it was successful. Alan Hoffman, one of our speakers over there, directed me to the New Hampshire Historical Society in Concord. Why there? Well, after going through records and records and records and records in Reading, there is no mention of Skinner's Hotel here. So I had to outsource. And I found an article published in the Concord Monitor 5 days after Lafayette passed through here. And it described what the general's trip looked like. And here it is. I will not read, this is an exact copy of the article, and believe me, I could not read that, so I have it right here. This is the article. He started from Boston June 21st at 9 a.m., passed through Charlestown and Medford to Reading. In the first two mentioned towns, the people whom he met without exception, respectfully saluted him and were drawn to the windows by his approach. At Skinner's Hotel, a large group of persons crowded in to see him, and they were received with great affability. The landlord refused any remuneration for the refreshment he supplies to him and his attendants. At Bernard's Hotel, a considerable number of persons of both sexes, all ages, drawn up in a regular order, cherished his approach. He stopped for a few moments and received congratulations. Bernard's Tavern. Well, Bernard's Tavern just over the line in North Reading. The next time you're up to the Lobster Claw for a delicious clam plate, look across the street. That's where Bernard's Tavern was. Now, for a more modern account, this is from local Reading historian. His name is Leah Eaton. In 1875, he published a volume called The Genealogical History of the Town of Reading, Massachusetts. He interviewed Reverend William Wakefield, who, as a youth, was right here when Lafayette came through. And this is Eaton's account. General Lafayette, in his visit to this country in 1825, passed through this town on his way to Concord, New Hampshire. He stopped at the hotel that stood where the bank building now stands. Yeah, there's the vault right up there. That's the bank building. All right, of course, and I absolutely lost my place. Hang in there. Okay, it happens on TV all the time. Okay. He made a short address to the crowd of citizens that came to see and welcome him. And this next part is for Reading residents only. Others will say, what is he talking about? Reverend Sanborn. You know, Sanborn Street over here, Peter Sanborn Village over there, which I'm probably going to end up after this production, responded in his remarks. He claimed the company of Minutemen under Dr. Brooks was the first company formed. He also stated that the company was accustomed to meeting in the kitchen of his house. His house was right over there in the corner where the annex to the town hall is now. They since moved it. They moved a lot of houses in town back then. You must have had a lot of oxen because houses were moving everywhere. And he said that Dr. Baker's unit practiced in his kitchen, and if you go into his kitchen, you can see the marks on the ceiling where the men practiced with their bayonets. The marks can be seen, and Mr. Sanborn pointed them out. Because there is a rumor that Mr. Sanborn took Lafayette by the hand and took him across the street to see it, but just like Washington slept here, there's no proof of that. The general was attended by another French gentleman in several carriages containing other distinguished parties. Mr. Wakefield, quite a lad, was present and still retains a vivid recollection. The French gentleman was Lafayette's personal secretary, who was with him for his entire trip, and every night Lafayette would write down, and he published a book called Lafayette in America, all in French. Well, one of our guests, over here, Mr. Hoffman, had nothing to do for 2 years, and he totally translated the book, Lafayette's book, and published a book called Lafayette in America, and I recommend it because it is a view of America at the time, written by a very intelligent person. He had quite a few views about us, slavery, treatment of Native Americans. Fascinating. Thank you for doing that. Our research is done. The marker is here. Thank you very much. House of Representatives.
Thank you all for coming today. How about a round of applause for Peter, who put this all together and did a fantastic job. It's too early for Peter Sanborn, please, Peter. You have many things to do. You may see him at the State House. He's a tour guide up there. It really is an honor for me to be here today to help partake in this event, recognizing Lafayette and his trip through, we come up on the 200th anniversary. We also are on the footstep of the 250th anniversary of our country. And it's stories such as Lafayette
and the stories of the people that served in the Revolutionary War that formed the quilt that is America's history. And perhaps now more than ever, it's time to renew those stories and look at those stories and the sacrifices the men and women made 200 years ago and 250 years ago to form our country. And to realize that the political discourse these days is occasionally challenging, but we should remember those things that unite us should be far greater than those things that divide us. And perhaps as we read about Lafayette's trip through here 200 years ago in English or in French, he can share some stories about seeing things in the horizon that would do us well to remember today, some 200 years later, or as we celebrate our, I'll get the word right, semi-bicentennial, 250 years, the birth of our country, and the sacrifices that men and women made. And it's hard on a day like today to think of Valley Forge, because in Reading we seem to do outdoor celebrations anytime we hit 90 degrees or more, at least based on this past summer. But it really is a privilege for me to be here today to play a small role in this event, particularly as someone who traces part of his history back to the Daughters of the American Revolution, forefathers who served in the Revolutionary War, and traces their roots back to the various states in New England in different lines. So thank you all for coming. It's a great day. Peter, thanks for the invitation. Thanks for putting this together, and thanks for all the work that went into doing it. And I want to also recognize that, and I know she's going to speak, the Vice-Consul from France is here from the Boston office, and we appreciate the relationship we've enjoyed with France for hundreds of years and continue to do so. So thank you all for coming today, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Representative Rich Haggerty.
Thank you, Brad. Friends and honored guests, thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you again to Peter McGuire, who helped lead this special group of Reading residents that are working so hard to formally recognize this visit, and also a special shout out to the Latham family for their enthusiastic participation in this incredible event today. Being a bit of a history guy, it gives me a great pleasure to be able to celebrate our community's history and to honor the visit to America by General Lafayette nearly 2 centuries ago. Lafayette would travel the new nation and be met with crowds thanking him for his commitment to our new nation and his connection to Reading. And this actual location will live on with this historic plaque installation today. It's easy to forget the service and sacrifice of those who came before us. It's easy to move on and never look back, but our shared history must be remembered and honored, as we're doing today. And that is why I'm so grateful for the efforts of the French consulate and everybody else involved who wanted to be here today to celebrate and to recognize this important moment. You see, we can all imagine the dirt paths for horse and carriage, a small tavern to stop in for visitors, a young country still finding its way, and one of the most significant figures of our revolution traversing the countryside of Reading to a hero's welcome. It's been said that Lafayette was an ardent supporter of the United States constitutional principles. He called on all nations to follow what he called the American example. And by the way, he didn't have to fight at all, right? He was a rich man at that time. He could have just mailed it in, as they said. And he didn't. And he didn't do it because he believed in the principle of self-determination. Looking through history, it seems as though Lafayette was beloved by the American people, not just for his courage while serving as a general under Washington or setting strategy to beat the English, but also for the hope he gave Americans day in, day out. They believed in someone who believed in them. Until then, we may pay homage to the man who fought for our nation to be, and a man who took a few brief moments to stop here in our community and visit with the people of Reading. Lafayette famously said of our nation, quote, "Humanity has won its battle. Liberty now has a country." May this marker remind us to honor his words and his work in our own lives today and each day. Thank you.
Just before our next speaker, if it wasn't for the Alice Barrows Elementary School, we would not be here. You're all in shock, aren't you? Well, as I said, I am a tour guide at the State House. And before COVID, the Barrows third grade would come, would meet with our representative, and would then go take a tour and I wanted to show them Reading connection, and would go up to the second floor, and that portrait over there, that is Governor Brooks. That is his governor's portrait. When after you finish being governor, you go for a portrait, and they're hung in the State House. And I had one Barrows student ask me why he's the only one in uniform of all the governors, and had to tell who he was. And I started investigating him, which brought us into Lafayette and all of that. So thank you, Barrows, 3rd grade. I'd like to introduce Karen Herrick, Vice Chair, Reading Select Board, along with her daughter, Madeline.
Thank you, Peter. Bienvenue tout le monde. Welcome, honored guests. My name is Karen Gately Herrick, and I'm thrilled to be here as Vice Chair of the Reading Select Board to further commemorate and honor a Revolutionary War hero and the long-standing alliance and friendship between La République Française et les États-Unis. I'm a lover of early American history, of all things French, and a great admirer of the General. My sincere thanks and appreciation to Peter McGuire, the Lafayette Trail, the Reading Historical Commission, the Town Manager's Office, the Consulate, French Consulate of Boston, and our legislators for coming today. And also, let me thank especially the Latham family. Without stewards who can appreciate historical buildings and history in general, we would not have been able to pursue this opportunity to be a permanent part of General Lafayette's farewell tour throughout New England. So thank you. It's always exciting to be able to add to our understanding of Reading's early history, as well to honor a true patriot, skilled military leader, and steadfast friend to a very young country, the Marquis de Lafayette. I would now like to introduce Madeline Herrick. She's my daughter. She is a 2018 graduate of Reading Memorial High School. She'll share her unique perspective on this day as an international relations and French major at Georgia Tech.
Bonjour tout le monde et merci d'être présente aujourd'hui pour marquer la visite de Lafayette à Reading. Comme elle a dit, je m'appelle Madeline Herrick, j'ai grandi à Reading et maintenant je suis étudiante des relations internationales et du français à l'université Georgia Tech. Pour moi, il y a 2 raisons, je trouve, cet événement significatif. La connexion entre les États-Unis et la France est une partie essentielle du succès de l'Alliance transatlantique. J'ai vu cette réalité pendant mes études en Europe cette année où j'ai étudié les institutions internationales de l'Europe. Le nouveau Conseil commerce et technologie, Union européenne et États-Unis, autant le succès des efforts occidentaux pour aider l'Ukraine. Toutes ces choses sont le résultat d'une relation transatlantique formidable qui a commencé il y a plus de 200 ans avec le soutien français de l'indépendance américaine. Lafayette a joué un rôle fondamental dans cette histoire. The connection between the United States and France is an essential part of the success of the transatlantic alliance. I saw this when I was studying abroad this summer in Europe, where I studied the international institutions of Europe. The Trade and Technology Council between the European Union, the United States, NATO, and the success of Western efforts to help Ukraine. All of these things are the result of a formidable transatlantic relation that started more than 200 years ago with the French support of American independence. Lafayette played a role fundamental in this story. Souvent, je trouve qu'on pense de la relation française-américaine simplement comme les grandes organisations, les diplomates ou les lieux économiques entre les entreprises. Mais ce sont aussi les individus. Pendant quelques mois, j'ai étudié en France dans une petite ville qui s'appelle Metz. La plupart des Américains ne savent pas que Metz existe, mais en fait, Metz est la ville où Lafayette a décidé de s'engager dans la guerre de l'indépendance des États-Unis. Donc le monde est plus petit qu'il semble, Et je crois que nous pouvons tous prendre part aux relations françaises-américaines. Je participe en étudiante de français. Vous participez en étant ici aujourd'hui. Et Lafayette a participé en voyageant dans un petit village en Nouvelle-Angleterre pour rendre visite à son ami. Merci. Often, I find we think about French-American relations simply as the business of these enormous international organizations, diplomats, or economic ties and businesses, but it's also the role of individuals. For some months, I studied in France in a small city called Metz. Most Americans do not know that Metz exists, but in fact, Metz is the place where Lafayette made the decision to join the American movement for independence. So I found the world is actually smaller than it seems, and I believe that we all have a part to play in French-American relations. I participate by studying French, you're participating by being here today, and Lafayette participated by traveling to a small town in New England to visit the home of his friend. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Sharlene Reynolds Santo, Reading Historical Commission. I sat among them, presented the program, and they gave me their wholehearted support. Sharlene, thank you.
My name is Sharlene Reynolds Santo, and I'm a member of the Reading Historical Commission. I don't know French. I'm going to be short and sweet. The Reading Historical Commission was pleased to have been involved with the initiative to add the Lafayette Trail marker in Reading. We'd like to thank Peter McGuire for starting the project and Commission member Virginia Adams for her research and assistance. This marker is a reminder to our town of the contributions Lafayette made to the success of the American Revolution and the founding of our nation, and to the role that Reading has played in the historic past. Thank you.
Before I go on, I'll forget this, but a portrait of Governor Brooks stands outside, right outside the office of the Speaker of the House in Boston. And when these gentlemen become Speaker of the House and you come out in the morning, just remember Governor Brooks is watching you. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Dorothea Jensen. Dorothea Jensen is from New Hampshire and a former teacher. She is an author of many children and young adult books, including Liberty-Loving Lafayette. Dorothea is a director of the Lafayette Trail, which provided our marker. Dorothea.
Seems a little high. Story of my life. Oh well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I am an officer of the Lafayette Trail Incorporated, and I would like to just give you a very brief history of how I got hooked into this and hooked into Lafayette himself. 25 years ago, I met a woman whom at the time I considered elderly. She's looking younger every day. Whose great-grandmother, she told me, her great-grandmother as a little girl had presented a posy to Lafayette in Northampton, Massachusetts, and he had kissed her on the cheek. He had bussed her on the cheek. And that kiss had come down in the family, and that her mother, who was the granddaughter of the woman who had gotten the original kiss, had ceremoniously given her a kiss and said, "This is from Lafayette." So, of course, first things first, I had to ask her to give me a kiss, and she did. But that was how how I first heard about the farewell tour of Lafayette. I didn't know anything about it until then. This was 25 years ago. And I started reading about it, and I discovered not only did he come to my town in New Hampshire, Hopkinton, New Hampshire, but he drove right by my house. So I like to think that there's Lafayette molecules maybe floating in the air. You never know. Anyway, I got so interested in it that I started writing books about the man. And A Bus from Lafayette was the first one I wrote about him. And it's set during his farewell tour in New England, in New Hampshire. And I also wrote, during the pandemic when I couldn't escape, I had been inspired by the musical Hamilton, and I started finding rhyming couplets forming in my head. And I've tried not to write them down because who's going to read something in rhyming couplets about Lafayette? But that's what I did, and it's out there. So I would like to tell you all about it, but it would take me longer than it would be to read the whole thing, which only takes 15 minutes. Anyway, I met Julian Ishay 7 years ago on the Yorktown battlefield, and I joined in the effort to help him mark the Lafayette Trail, which, when he was on his tour, literally attracted millions of people. There's never ever been anything like it before or since in our history. Now, Julian could not be with us today, and he asked me to come here and officially represent the Lafayette Trail. So that is why I am here. And he also asked me to officially read a letter from the Pomeroy Foundation. Now, the Pomeroy Foundation is the foundation that pays for the manufacture of these markers. Here's the letter. Congratulations from all of us at the William G. Pomeroy Foundation on the celebration of your new Lafayette Trail historic marker. We send you our best wishes from Syracuse, New York, as you commemorate the legacy of General Lafayette and his visit to Reading. At the Pomeroy Foundation, one of our main initiatives is to help people celebrate their community's history. Since 2006, my father, Bill Pomeroy, established our very first marker program. We have awarded more than 1,800 grants for roadside markers and plaques around the nation. We feel strongly that markers help educate the public, encourage pride of place, promote historic tourism, and preserve history. Pomeroy markers are well researched with primary sources reviewed by professional historians. We're excited that Reading is now part of a select group of locations from around the nation who are able to tell their history with a Pomeroy Foundation-funded roadside marker. Since the beginning of 2020, the Pomeroy Foundation has been funding historic markers along the Lafayette Trail, established to commemorate his 1824-25 U.S. farewell tour. The bicentennial of the farewell tour is only a couple of years away. It officially starts in August of 2024. And the Pomeroy Foundation has committed to fund up to 175 markers, now including one specifically recognizing the general service to the American Revolution in multiple states and Washington, D.C. As we celebrate General Lafayette's visit to Reading and the indelible impact he left on the United States, we are reminded that the history of the farewell tour touches countless sites across the country. We commend your efforts to bring greater attention to Lafayette's impact on American history and the enduring friendship between France and the United States. On behalf of the Pomeroy Foundation, we extend our appreciation to the town of Reading, Latham Law Offices, Julian Ishay, and the Lafayette Trail, and to all the individuals and organizations who helped obtain the marker that you dedicate today. Signed, Darren Pomeroy, trustee of the Pomeroy Foundation. Now comes the commercial. The Pomeroy Foundation does pay for the actual signs, which is a huge, huge contribution to this effort, but does not support any of the operating expenses for the trail's planning and research and so forth. In the last couple of years, we have now reached the halfway point of our planned 175 markers, and we hope to have everything in place by the time the bicentennial starts in 2024. And for this, we need help. So we are a 401c3 nonprofit organization, and donations to our efforts are tax deductible, which is easily done through our website, thelafayettetrail.org. And please help by becoming a member for a nominal fee every year, or by just giving money. We would really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming today.
I'll put this up there. Thank you. I just want to make one additional comment to what Dee Dee just said, talked about the thousands and thousands came out to see Lafayette. There was only one other visitor to the United States that perhaps maybe matched the number of people out to see this group. That was the Beatles in the 1960s. Beatles are a strong number 2. I'd like to introduce Alan Hoffman, President of the Lafayette Friends of America. As mentioned in my talk, Alan was instrumental in leading me on the right track for primary source to have our marker placed here. Alan?
Thank you, Peter. It's a real pleasure to be able to participate in this wonderful event. And I saw that Peter put me 9th on the schedule, and I was scratching my head to try to come up with something different. I hope I have succeeded, but you will be the judge. I'm going to tell you about the carriages that preceded Lafayette to Reading on June 21, 1825. A.A. Parker is the author of a book called Recollections of Lafayette in 1824 and 1825. It was published in 1879. This is the book. In June of 1825, Amos Andrews Parker was living in Concord, New Hampshire, where he served as editor of The Statesman, a newly minted newspaper in Concord, and as an aide to Governor Morrill, New Hampshire's governor. The governor assigned him to go and pick up Lafayette in Boston after the Bunker Hill ceremonies were concluded and bring him to the state capitol in Concord. Parker had traveled to Boston with 3 carriages, a barouche drawn by 4 horses, a 4-horse stagecoach, and a 2-horse covered carriage for baggage. All this had been provided by Nathaniel Walker, the regular stage driver on the Boston to Concord route. When he was about to call on Lafayette, whom he had met in Boston in 1824, Parker was intercepted by Massachusetts Governor Levi Lincoln's aide, who informed him that that was impossible because Massachusetts would not relinquish the guest until the state line at Methuen. Well, he had to change his plans a little bit, but just prior to heading north to Methuen, a veteran of the Revolution who had attended the Bunker Hill celebration and got left behind somehow begged Mr. Parker for a ride, and Parker agreed to his joining him in the barouche. As Mr. Walker had informed each scheduled stop on the way to Boston that he would be returning with Lafayette, when the New Hampshire carriages arrived in Malden, they were greeted by a large crowd, cannon burst, bells and music, and shouts of "Welcome, Lafayette." Parker perceived that the multitude believed that the graybeard sitting next to him was none other than the general. Therefore, he felt obliged to undeceive them and gave a short speech explaining why he did not have Lafayette and telling the crowd that Lafayette would arrive in an hour escorted by the Massachusetts authorities. He then identified his companion as a Revolutionary veteran and asked the locals to give him 3 cheers, which they did. The soldiers stood, gave a soldier's salute, and they left. Parker writes that he made more than 20 such speeches at the assemblies in the villages, at the hotels, stores, and crossroads along the route. As you know, Reading was one of the stops. This was a task, he recalled, that became irksome to him and made him appreciate what Lafayette had been going through for nearly a year times 2, because Lafayette not only had to make speeches, but to listen to them as well. Upon receiving Lafayette and his entourage at Methuen, Parker told the general of his experience. I will quote how he describes the conversation in his book. Immediately, I stated to the general the dilemma I had been in and the many speeches I had to make on account of his absence. But as he was now present, I felt entirely relieved, for I should only be required to hear speeches and not make them. Lafayette laughed heartily at the joke the governor of Massachusetts had unwittingly put upon me, and then said that he too had made many speeches on the route to Methuen, perhaps not so many in number as I had, for at some of the crossings, or only a few assembled, he only tendered his thanks and passed on. But he supposed that some of his might have been longer, especially at Andover. But he was willing to call speech-making even, and now, as you have got your hand in it, why not alternate with me in speech-making on the remainder of the route to Concord? This was said with such a comical face that I could not but join him in a hearty laugh, for it was well known to him as well as to myself that the desire to see and hear him was so intense that the most eloquent man that ever lived would not be tolerated a moment as his substitute. So that's the story of the carriages that preceded Lafayette to this site. I just want to say that I hope to see you all on June 21, 2025, when the American Friends of Lafayette is planning bicentennial celebrations here, as well as most of the other stops that Lafayette made in his 13-month trip across the eastern United States. And thank you for your attention.
And now it's my honor to present the Vice-Consul of the Consulate General de France at Boston. How did I do? How did I do? Anouk Dumas.
Dear Representative Jones, dear Representative Haggerty, dear Alan Hoffman, dear Dorothea Jensen, dear Fidel Maltez, dear all dear friends. As Vice-Consul of France in Boston, I'm very happy to be here with you today in Reading to celebrate General Lafayette's visit to this town a little less than 200 years ago. I'd like to thank all of you for hosting this ceremony on the occasion of the new historical marker as part of the Lafayette Trail. It is very exciting to see this initiative celebrating Lafayette's farewell tour grow throughout all the region. When one refers to the American Revolutionary War and French revolutions, one historical figure comes to mind, General Marquis de Lafayette. He fought by the side of the Americans to defend their cause. Actually, in this town, I was told we must also summon the local hero of Reading, the Dr. John Brooks. He led the Minutemen at Lexington and Concord. He joined Lafayette to train the Continental Army in their efforts for the colonies in their war for independence. They eventually became friends. Throughout his life and after he returned to France, the general remained strongly committed to the principles of freedom, independence, and democracy. He especially had a major role in France in presenting the first draft of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizens to the French National Assembly in 1789. As the last surviving Major General of the Revolutionary War, the General Lafayette was invited by US President James Monroe to visit the 24th State Union for what would become his farewell tour in the US. In 1824, he was in Boston with John Brooks, greeting each other. In 1825, he came back here in Reading. He was in Reading. So this story is a testament to the unwavering friendship between the United States and France, with intertwining destinies and lasting alliances sealed by treaties as well as wedding rings. So in honoring the past, we remind ourselves of this bond between two nations that not only helped to shape the world as it is, but one that is necessary to help us face today's and also tomorrow's challenges. In closing, it's very important to keep alive the memory of these great men and women through initiatives like the Lafayette Trail. So let me once again thank all of you for organizing this commemoration. Mes amis, vive les États-Unis et vive la France. I wish you all a great afternoon.
Before we unveil our monument, I'd like to give out a thank you to folks who made this day possible. First, to all our guest presenters. To the Latham family, Brad, Chris, Joshua, Sophia, and the whole family, who not only worked with our group, but offered their beautiful garden for our marker support. Can you imagine if this marker was beside that walk and don't walk sign? Thank you very much, Latham family. I'd like to thank the Reading Historical Commission, who welcomed our proposal and gave it full support, and the Lafayette Trails Incorporated, who not only accepted our proposal, but worked alongside until completion. Would like to thank the Reading Celebration Trust. Our marker was provided without cost. However, the Lafayette Trail is a nonprofit organization that totally depends on donations that Dorothea Jensen talked about. The Celebration Trust Committee was pleased to offer assistance with a donation. We thank them very, very much. The town of Reading, especially Julia Mercier, Assistant Department Head and Community Development Director. Being a novice on these things, Julie took me under her wing and by the hand and led me through the entire permitting process. That's permitting, plural. On numerous occasions, emailed Julia to Peter, I think you should be doing this. Thank you very much, Julie Mercier. The Reading Police Department providing our detail and safety, and especially Officer Michael Stoughton, Traffic and Safety Officer. He and I walk all over the place, making suggestions to keep you folks safe. And how about Brendan Manning Fife player, proud member of the Reading Memorial High Marching Band. And our sound crew, the Pothier family, band parents and former band members also. Us band parents never give up. We keep going. And last, a big shout out to Reading Owns Lafayette Marker Committee, Virginia Adams, Virginia and Everett Blodgett, and me. A year ago, we started with an idea that came to fruition. Could not have done it without you and Zoom. Virginia, and Everett, thank you very, very much. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Dumas back up here. Sophia, come on. And I'm going to I wonder if anybody checked to make sure this is the right one. Well, sir.
Stand here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can get one more picture if you don't mind. Yeah, as you were standing, yeah, there, yeah. All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming. Enjoy the pastries. French pastries, of course.
My French teacher's right there, Madame. Simon, she's brilliant.